Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 2. It's called Far From Home. It is not a sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming, I'll just make that clear right now. I will also acknowledge that this has changed since last week, because last week it was part 2 of the same title as the first episode.
Yeah, I was just thinking last week was definitely something part 1, right?
Well, it was. It's now changed in IMDb to just the title on its own, so... Something was a mistake in IMDb or something or other, because there's another two-parter later on in the list, so we'll see if that changes as well, but at least this was there last week. So, but hey-ho, so despite the fact that we didn't get that right because they changed the title on IMDb, we did kind of predict a lot of what this episode was going to be almost to a T.
Down to the final beat.
We kind of said, it's going to go back to them coming through the portal, they're going to land further in the timeline, it's going to end with Michael finding them. Like, I don't know if we said those exact things, but we were in the ballpark of a lot of it.
I'm pretty sure we did say pretty much those exact things.
Nah, but you don't nail it down, because someone's going to correct us, they're going to go back and listen and find something to nitpick and say, technically, we said this instead. Never lock it in. Never cement it.
It's confidence. I'm confident.
Look, I've been doing this a while now. I have learned how to navigate the pedantic comments, okay?
I invite them. Let them try.
Well, I don't.
Bring up that engagement.
No, go away. So this was the main ship. This was the crew. And we start off after Burnham's went through the portal, so therefore it did not rewind. Because from the perspective of this ship, it was already after she had left.
I want to counter argument this in that the episode begins with a previously on that is all ending. Wait. It is all the ending of season 2 from all of these characters' perspective. That the ending beat of that is we're gonna follow her through the portal. We watch them going through the portal, and then the very next beat is following them through and coming out. So I would argue that counts, and that's a rewind.
No, because all the stuff that was before that moment was in the previously on. It was scenes from season 2. Does not count.
Of course it counts. It was part of the narrative.
No. At no point last week did the previously on Star Trek Discovery count as rewinding, because it's always there. It never counts. Never counts in any TV show.
When it clearly leads in this.
No. This is such a technicality to try and win this argument.
This continues from the previously on. It's not like a hard cut that, and now we're here. It just flows right on through.
Shows do that all the time.
And therefore it's part of the narrative and it counts. It's a rewind, damn it.
It's not a rewind. It's you got a previous on, as you always do, and then you got into new content, and it's definitely not. It's 100 years later in the future, as we find out at the end. It's 100 years later.
Was it 100 years?
Sorry, 1 year. Sorry,
I was just going to say, like, what did I? I was like, shit, did I really mishear the ending?
I was too busy being so right that I got a detail wrong to make it more imperfect.
By a huge magnitude, though. Like, I was literally like, okay, did I not pay attention to the ending at all? I was really worried then for a second.
Just divide what I said by 100 and it was accurate. All right, sharp. So.
It's quite a lot.
The ship lands. That's an even round number. Dividing by 100 is easy. It's not you have to divide by 67.
Do you know what else is a nice round 100 that we use? Percentages. And 100% versus 1% is a huge difference.
100% can literally mean any number. So
exactly.
That's not exactly. No, shut up. So we land in this planet, this derelict planet. Well, mostly derelict planet. It's got like a little colony on it that's kind of run down. It's very old town. It's like a western. There's literally saloon doors on this little bar,
and everyone's kind of reaching for the guns. It plays exactly like a western.
Not for long though. It's only really westerny in its introduction. Once things get going, it's very distinctly different, because the people in the bar, once they actually get communicating with them, don't play out the way they do. In fact, we actually meet some characters, at least one of which kind of believes in the Federation. And I wonder, given that we find out it's a year later and Michael's been here for a year, I do wonder if the interest and the belief in the Federation is maybe on a slight uptick because of whatever she's been doing in the year.
It's possible. I'm not, going to discount that. I don't. This particular case, it feels like they've been here a while, and he's been having this kind of pipe dream of the Federation for a while, longer than a year, is what I'm saying, I guess. But I could be wrong.
No, I'm not necessarily saying that it inspired the idea at all, but the idea that he's even been willing to be more vocal about it is perhaps inspired by the idea of someone else is now talking about it. So, the idea that he believes in the Federation is something that he's less embarrassed about talking about, or at the very least, has given him some confidence to actually speak up about it.
It's certainly possible.
So, but before we get there, obviously they're all in the chaos of the crashing of the ship. We've talked many a time on this show about giving some of the bridge crew more time, and I do think it's interesting. Even though she doesn't get a whole lot of time in the episode, we are clearly doing a plot with Detmer. She has this disorientated sort of moment at the start. She's still kind of out of it at the end, even though she is able to follow her orders and try and fly the ship out of the parasite ice, as we'll get to. But clearly something's amiss. The one thing I hope it's not, because she has some tech in her head, I really hope it's not that Control has somehow lived.
Oh god, I didn't even consider that
through her headpiece. I don't think it is, but I hope it's not that, because that would really upset me.
I think it's far more likely it's just some sort of malfunction that, because she has a physical injury there, on that side of her head from when they came through. A few people got thrown around by the look of it. So it's possible that there's just a physical malfunction happening with that tech because of that, rather than Control. Please don't let it be Control.
It feels like it's a bit more than that, just because of the way that it's teasing something, as opposed to just she's a little, I don't know. Regardless, though, it did give her a little bit more on her own, and I think what I appreciate about this episode is that it really showed, and I don't know if we've had one like this yet, where it's really just had no Michael, barring of course the very, very final scene, which you can kind of see coming. When this ship comes with a tractor beam and they think it's going to be a hostile ship, and it's like hailing them, and you're like, okay, it's going to be Michael, because who else is it going to be?
Yeah, I feel like we might have had an episode here or there like that, but none to this extent.
Yeah, this was very much, this was the rest of the cast carrying it. It's in particular Saru, Tilly, with a bit of Giorgio kind of in there. And I'd totally forgotten about Nan, who I'm now going to refer to as Yum Yum Girl, because of her line in the season 2 finale. I have not forgotten about that wildly inappropriate line delivery.
I fortunately had, and you've just ruined it all over again.
Nope.
You said that, and oh yeah, that was the thing.
Yum yum.
And do you know what I will say is, I think this is a pretty good episode, and I do, I still like all of the cast here and the crew. I do think it's lacking a little bit of a spark without Michael, which is something I didn't actually think I'd have that opinion of before this episode without her, but I did feel her absence.
I don't know if I agree with that. If anything, because I enjoyed this episode also. If I have a worry right now after these first 2 episodes, it's that the main plot's not really kicked in yet, and I'm a little bit worried that the main plot's what's going to ruin it when it does kick in.
We said that last week, yeah. And let me be clear, when I say, I felt I was missing a bit of a spark, I'm not worried by that. I think maybe it is part of the fact that she has been such a overwhelming presence throughout the show so far, that having such a noticeable absence, I kind of felt it more than I should, or more than I would have done in in a previous Trek show if we went without one of these characters.
Nah, see, I think that's why I like this episode. I think because we've relied so much on her, and she's always been this central focus, that stepping away from her felt kind of refreshing. It was...
No, I get that, and that was my assumption going in, is that's how I would feel, which is why I'm surprised that I felt her absence as lacking a spark, because I thought I'd be just so glad to do everything else, so, and take a break from her, and I'm like, by the end of the episode, I was like, Joe, I think I like this show more when she's in it.
Yeah, I can't really get on board with that. I mean, not that I dislike Michael at all. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to say that I felt a refreshing focus on these other characters, and I didn't feel anything was missing really throughout the episode. It was actually kind of nice seeing Saru in situations where he had to stand up for the ideas of Starfleet. To see Tilly kind of awkwardly try to stand up for the ideas of Starfleet. Giorgio being there is kind of this wild card who's willing to kill everyone in the room, who's going to cause them harm, and for Saru to have to then talk her down, I think these moments are what make the episode, because it's not entirely unpredictable. Like I say, it's very obvious that Michael was going to be the one at the end. It was very obvious that when Giorgio has mysteriously left the ship when she wasn't supposed to, that she was going to kind of be the cavalry who was going to come in and sort of save the day when they're all being held at laser gunpoint.
It was a very straightforward episode in that regard, right? It does exactly what you expect it to at almost every moment. It like never surprises you. But that's not, again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I do like all of the beats.
Now, the beats play out fairly nicely. It's something that it rides a fine line where it's aware that we've already learned a lot about this modern world that the characters haven't yet, because we've already learned from episode 1 about the teleporters that are portable. We've already learned about the fact that the Federation doesn't exist. We've learned, we've heard the burn reference before. So all these things do come up again, which, because we've only just been introduced to all these things, it's actually still quite useful for us to have them reiterated at this early stage, because we're still learning them and getting used to the idea of these things. So that's a really good idea.
I think it handles all those things quite well, in that it goes into them enough that, okay, to remind us, but cuts away from the bulk of it, so that, okay, the characters need to learn this, but we don't. It doesn't feel exposition-y.
Well, I think what it does smartly is that while it reiterates those details, it does present us with the character, the antagonist in this episode, when as soon as he arrives, because all the other characters in the bar who have realised that they're a ship that is Federation, they don't know they're time travellers. They realise that they're a ship from the Federation, and the fact that they have dilithium, again, another detail that is reinforced in this episode is how valuable and rare it is now because it was outlawed. Or not outlawed, but you know what I mean, like it's scarce.
Controlled, limited.
Yeah. But because of that, they make this deal, and we find out that they've been, hoping for Federation, and they're excited by it and all the rest of it. But as soon as this villain shows up, this Zaire, who tries to, basically force them to give them all the dilithium over, kills the main guy that we've met in this bar, who we've got enough of to kind of like him a little bit, or at least care a little bit that he's just been murdered. It felt kind of violent and brutal. A little bit darker for, not this show, but darker for Trek in general. But I think the smart thing that it does is that he immediately knows they're time travelers. He implies that he knows a couple of times before he outright just says it. And I think having our antagonist jump to that point without us having to go, because a big part of episode 1 was we know where Michael's from, but Book didn't. And Book keeps hearing these little questions and these weird things she doesn't know, and these questions. And it was a big part of the plot in episode 1 was them learning who each other were. Their relationship was all kind of based on the idea of her not knowing what the future was and him not knowing where she was from, and that was what the dynamic was. I think if this episode had us then have to go through that journey in a different form with these other characters again, it might have been tiring. But because this villain comes in and immediately is like, nah, these readings, this wormhole, all this stuff that's happening, only one thing causes that: you're time travelers. He knows immediately, and that lets us jump that hurdle. It lets us get to the point where, okay, we're into new territory now, and we can see these characters interact with a villain who I think, he might pop up again, because obviously the big heart and the big sort of dramatic beat of this episode is that through Saru talking down Giorgio and making sure she will not stoop to this level, that she will not kill anyone else, and this one guy's the only guy that's left. She's already snapped the necks of the other ones. But doing this in front of these others who weren't necessarily the true believers. The main guy was the true believer who's already been shot. But seeing this talk down of Giorgio and Saru wanting to spare this guy's life, but Saru ultimately, as a member of Starfleet, says it's not our place to try this man or decide the punishment. This is your culture. This is your planet. It's up to you. And the guy picks up the laser shotgun, and he makes the choice to let him go. But he's never to come back, and he's like, you might die out there. We'll give you the supplies that you were going to make Telewalk with to go get the dilithium. So he might pop up again, he might not. I think as a one-off villain, though, when he first walked in, I was kind of like, I don't know if I buy this guy. But then the more he actually got to interact with them, the more he had dialogue, I kind of, oh, you know what, he's not bad. It was a bit better than I thought it would be.
I know where you're coming from, and I think the problem, and I say problem loosely, that feeling you had at the start when he walked in, is he immediately comes across as smug. And at first you're like, you kind of are nobody really, you don't feel like he deserves it. But by the time he kind of reveals that, he knows they're time travelers, you kind of get why he's feeling smug like that. Like he knows he's got such a situational advantage over these nobodies, essentially.
I think that is a big part of it. I think him having that knowledge and coming across as smarter than he maybe because I've definitely seen episodes of sci-fi shows or even non-sci-fi shows where you have this villain who walks in who doesn't know who our main team are really from or really are, and they'll be all smug, and we'll kind of be waiting for them to have their moment to like sort of use their secret abilities or
prove
powers.
Why they feel that way. Yeah.
Or no, not the villain. You misunderstand me. The main team, like waiting for their moment to prove why they're who we know they are, right? But they can't just, for whatever reason. The example, for some reason, that's popping in my head is like every other episode in Smallville, right? Where they'd be in a situation, but Clark couldn't just use his powers to deal with the situation because it'd be in front of people, right?
Yeah.
Right? So he'd have to kind of wait for his moment or wait for some way to do it sneakily or whatever. I like that this is the equivalent of someone walking into a scene in Smallville. Clark's being all secretive. He's like, look, I know you're from Krypton. Give up the shit, all right? Let's get on with this. I've got kryptonite in my pocket, right?
It kind of is, yeah.
You know, and I think that comparison, I like that villain a bit more because we're not just doing that. And not that this show is guilty of doing this a lot, because it's not, but just TV in general does these kind of situations a lot.
Again, it's more just we've been trained by decades of TV to understand these tropes. When the villains walk in and and have that mindset, and we kind of just know this is how the scene plays out. 8-9 times out of 10. So to just upend that, just in a not even in like a really overt way, but just in a subtextual way, kind of makes us appreciate it, because even if we're not consciously aware of what it's doing, the writers are aware that those tropes are embedded into us, and they know that we'll respond to this, even if we don't know necessarily why.
Yeah, so I thought it was a smart writing in this. I think these 2 episodes, I will say this definitively now after 2 of these episodes in season 3, regardless of what the main plot ends up being, and that could completely shit the bed and have all the sort of the chosen one angel problems that season 2 had eventually, I do think these 2 episodes are the most solidly written on their own individual basis episodes of the show so far. They're tight. I feel like they both do everything they're supposed to accomplish, and they do it in a manner that feels like it's confident. Isn't necessarily completely like reinventing the wheel by any means, but is doing enough little flourishes in the writing that makes it feel like it's actually got an idea of what it's doing.
No, I think I agree with that. I mean, I'm not sure I can outright say that they're the best episodes of the show in that regard. There might be 1 or 2 other episodes that I'd have to look at that on their own merits, rather than being tied up in things. Just on their own merits, what they did were pretty tight. I do like this as just it's, in many regards, it's setting up a new show, and I think that's why doing the basic plot beats that we are is really to a benefit for these episodes. In that, it feels like back to basics in a good way. In that we're resetting, we're reestablishing all these things, and we have to take this from the ground up.
Well, that's actually one of the problems that this show had at the start, is that it didn't start at the basics. It tried to leap ahead into this big conflict. Yes. And there's this big gargantuan thing that set up Michael as this traitor.
Right, and this here feels like it's actually starting from the ground level, and it's like while these episodes aren't like above and beyond amazing, they're not, but they're very good, well written, like you say, but quite simple. But they're really solid foundations. It's a really strong place to build off of, which I don't think this show really had before now. No, it's
a solid foundation that the show never actually started with, and maybe we all look back at this. Maybe if this ends up going like 8 seasons, we're going to say no, 3 through 8. That's the real show. Those first 2 weird seasons of this weird prologue that honestly most people can probably just skip and just jump straight to this. And
it already feels like a weird prologue,
because even like if you jump back to the ship, like the stuff with Culber and Stem, it's like you don't have to know that one of them died. Like you could start the show here, this little subplot, which doesn't really do much other than just sort of sets up that he's the doctor, he's a scientist, he'll do stuff even though he's hurt, his husband worries about him, that's it. Like it sets up the relationship, and you don't really need to know anything that came before. It would work on its own.
It's true. I would love an experiment of showing these 2 episodes to someone who hadn't watched any of the show beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even tell them it's season 3. Just pretend it's the start of the show, and see how they react to that.
The only things that wouldn't work is whenever they reference Control, or the fact that Giorgio like killed someone into slush on her boots. Like, those are the only little things that feel like, okay, there was a show before this. Everything else feels like it could just be this is just the backstory to the start of a show, as opposed to...
This is almost a new pilot, these 2 episodes.
Yeah, it really is in a lot of ways. But yeah,
it's bizarre because we should be complaining about that in theory, going, oh, we're getting just 2 episodes that feel like a pilot in season 3 should be a negative. But because this show has been, even at the points where we liked it, has been shaky at best and does not have this foundational point, it feels like finally now we can grow from here.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily. I mean, there's good shows that have sort of reinvented themselves and had kind of what you would call a repilot. And I don't think it's always a case of just because it was bad before it works now. I mean, an example, of course, the spin-off of the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, its 5th season kind of started a new phase. Unfortunately, it never really got to do more than 1 season of its new kind of era, but it definitely was into a new phase, and season 5's opener did kind of feel like a new pilot. Sure, it wasn't completely standalone. I don't think you could have just jumped into it, but it was definitely kind of a resetting of everything that was going on and re-establishing
a whole
where we were.
new status quo and stuff.
Yeah.
Beyond what was just a typical, start of a new season, I guess.
But yeah, so Saru's speech though to Giorgio to make her stand down, because we know that she can take Saru in a fight, right? She'll put him down, but Saru stands up to her and says, "No, that's not who we are, and you're on my ship, and I'm the acting captain, so you will stand down. That is an order." And Saru's always been such a
meek.
Yeah, he's never, like, obviously we saw him have a bit more of this in season 2, but he definitely started off as a character who you never thought is that confident. He always came across as, someone lacking a bit of a backbone.
You could, in season 1, you could never imagine him pulling rank on anyone, let alone someone like Giorgio.
Especially evil Giorgio from
right.
from Mirrorworld. So, and she has a couple of moments where she interacts with various characters on the ship. I did enjoy, Telly had a couple of moments. There's a moment earlier on where Giorgio is basically constantly, like, belittling Telly in front of Saru, and she's trying to, like, give this report of what's going on with the ship and where they are, and that the ice is increasing, and eventually it's going to, like, crush the ship once it gets dark.
It's got, like, pitch black rules on the ice.
Basically, yeah, it's pitch black rules. And she's taking sort of long to explain some of her points, and eventually, like, Giorgio starts giving her shit, and it's when she gives her shit for the 2nd or 3rd time where Telly just goes, "What the f-?" and, like, Saru kind of interrupts her to stop the F-bomb from happening, but it was a genuinely funny moment.
It was, and I'm surprised they could, because this show has dropped an F-bomb once or twice, right?
They have, yeah. It was, and Telly was actually the first one to do it, and maybe they kind of realised that it's not the show for it, so they thought, well, we'll do the implied one without actually going that far.
Maybe they did, yeah. Maybe this is finally seeing some restraint and awareness of what the show is, rather than just we're doing it because we can. Yeah,
because that's the way it felt before. It really felt like they were just doing it because they could, rather than because it really felt like it was at home in the show. And honestly, this moment, it was funnier probably because she was cut off. Like the tease of it. In fact, I'll reference Buffy. There's a moment in season 6 of Buffy when she's in a time loop, and when she realizes she's in a time loop, she says what they, and it cuts to the next scene. And
it's a really common thing that you get on network TV, obviously, because they're not allowed. Even a lot of like kids films, like up to and including PG-13, because obviously they can have like 1, but they'll do it as a common thing in those movies, as to like, okay, most people, anyone above an age will get it, but we're cutting it because there are kids watching.
It's very effective, though. It was very effective in that episode of Buffy, though, because they never really implied an F-bomb even before then. Even though they technically can imply one all they want, like every week if they want to, they'd never done it. So it actually came across as very strong, despite the fact that she never actually said the word. It cut away. And it made it much funnier than... if they'd been doing that every week, it wouldn't be funny. And to be fair, it's not like this show's dropped tons of F-bombs. It's done it a couple of times. And
it's had like 2 or 3, right?
It's been fairly spread out. So... And obviously it's been a while since season 2 now as well, so memories kind of faded a little bit that this was funny on its own. But it's one of those things where I feel like it's getting its humor right, like characters. Oh, by the way, like Tilly's hair in HDR. She stepped out the ship and she was walking through the ice planet, and it's just like her and Saru walking and talking, and like she's like, "Why did you pick me?" And he's like giving her a little boost and like giving her a pep talk. Like her hair, the red, was just popping off the screen so vibrantly.
It's gorgeous.
it's like
slash terrifying, depending on your perspective.
It's like an explosion. So anyway, but now we have these moments. Jet, the Doctor, she's still pretty funny. I laughed pretty hard earlier on. She's actually got what looks like the old captain's chair from the original show because her back's bad, so she's got like a little chair that she's like taking around with her. But it actually looks like it's got the big bulky arms, and it looks like the chair that Kirk would sit in back in the original show.
Yeah.
I think that's very intentional. But I laughed really hard because there's like a guy cleaning up the the room where Stamets would go in to like connect to the thing, and she's like, "Hey." However she calls
him Hazmat.
Hazmat, yeah. Hazmat over here's cleaning up the room. He's like, "My name's Eugene." I've already forgotten it. Like when she said I've already forgotten it, I thought that was really funny. She had a couple of moments.
There was another bit she had towards the end. I think it was when everything was going down, and and Stamets was kind of having a moment in the tunnel, and there was a bit of a lover's tiff going on in this life or death situation. She was like, "Can you do all this later?" But just she had like interjecting constantly into it. It was just funny.
Yeah, I mean, we liked her last season too. She was a good addition to the cast. So I'm happy to see that. So, yeah, I mean, it's obviously there's less introductory in this episode just by the fact that it's the second time. But it was nice catching up with all these crew members. It was nice to give them their own episode. Really setting up that even Saru is still standing up for Starfleet, and having those scenes with him was, I think, a big deal for him and Tilly. I think they had, even Tilly like smashing the guy, because the bad guy starts trying to negotiate with the guy with the laser blast, like, "Hey, I'll come back and kill your kids if you keep siding with them." And Tilly, smashes his head with the bottle and calls him sweetheart, because he kept condescendingly calling her sweetheart throughout the episode. So it was nice to see her stick up for herself a little bit, which again, nice little bit in the writing here is that the episode starting with her essentially be berated by Georgiou, and then having this villain be more scary because he's a villain who literally kills someone in front of them, and then having her get to stand up for herself at the end. It's just it's a little thing, but it's a nice little arc.
I mean, she has a really clearly defined through line arc in this episode. Like saying, that you've got that at the start that puts her in that mindset, and then when she's walking with Saru, her being afraid, and him going, look, it's fine that you're afraid, but you gotta hide it right from now. And then when they go into the bar, and they all pull the guns out, and she's obviously afraid, but she's the one who de-escalates the situation. She's the one who comes up with quoting some regulation or whatever.
Yeah.
And kind of makes light of it at the end, being like, if you tell us your names, you're not strangers. So that would kind of solve the situation as well. So it's just, and then like saying, at the end, you've got the physical confrontation as well. So there's a really clearly defined arc for her, probably clearer than anyone else in this episode.
And you've got our Un and An over the tech, because when he's repairing the thing, he's basically just 3D printing a new one with these little.
And she's like, "I've never seen anyone do this with whatever material before." Yeah. And he's like, "What are you on about? This is like standard."
Yeah, it's just kind of like, it's very similar looking tech almost to the computers on the ship from Book. Like, clearly, like the whole idea of like these nanite looking things swirling around and doing things is clearly going to be a lot of the tech in this world.
This is pretty base level by the sounds of it, because they don't have anything anything super advanced. They've got kind of like the basics, the necessities, just which kind of tells you what level this is at. That they've still just got this lying around.
Yeah. So, and I think as much as we always questioned, we assumed that Georgiou was going to get to be in Section 31 because it felt like they were setting that up for her. So we were surprised when she was on the ship at the end of season 2. I am kind of liking the weird like trust not trust, the uneasy alliance, if you will, between them right now.
Yeah, I'm still somehow expecting her to end up back to do season 31, because I'm sure they did announce her as part of that show. So, it's still a possibility.
Unless she sets up Section 31 in the future, so it's just like her and new people with no Ash.
Please God, let that be true.
There's options here.
That would actually be pretty great. If by the end of this season, for example, let's say they want to set it up to happen after this season, if Saru and Michael are kind of de facto in charge of Starfleet right now, and they're like, look, we don't really like it, but we need Section 31. We need the Black Ops side of that branch, and kind of ask her to run it, because that's what she's good at. I think I would be inherently more excited for that show by like 20% immediately, just if that was the setup instead of what we were expecting before.
Maybe. But no, that was a solid episode. I think that's 2 in a row that have been solid, and I like the world they've set up. I like the idea of them standing up for what Starfleet and the Federation means. It's just a case of now, okay, what is the actual plot? And I assume it's going to be about like finding out what the burn is, because it's been mentioned multiple times now. We're going to dive into that, no doubt. But
probably investigating that, and also actively trying to re-establish Starfleet as some sort of, physical entity that has any sort of power.
More importantly, though, there has to be a villain, and it's notable that the villain here does mention, one of the things that Georgiou kind of figures out is that he's trying to get their dilithium quickly because he knows that there's going to be other people, the competitors, who are going to be coming for that ship. So I have to imagine that someone fairly powerful is going to want their dilithium at the very least, if not want to snuff out any last signs of the Federation, because maybe they had a hand in the first place. Maybe not personally, because it's been like 100 years, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, honestly, I would be okay if we can go for a while in the season without like an obvious, here's the villain for the season. If it's more just, this is our objective, we need to do, this will help if just their goal is, re-establishing the Federation to some semblance of what it should be. And, they're like, okay, this is the objective that we need to do. And then there is a specific obstacle, each episode for whatever their objective is. I'd be okay if that was the thing for like half the season before we even worry about introducing like an overarching villain sort of thing.
Yeah, so there you go. That is episode 2 of Star Trek Discovery Season 3. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. Liking super important on YouTube is the easiest and the free way, of course, of letting us know you enjoy the content and want to help keep it coming. But you can, of course, also support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. You can also check out, of course, that our Star Trek reviews. We've been working our way through Next Generation. We're on Season 4 right now. We did the entire original series, starting from scratch all the way back at the start of 2017. So go check out that. So there's, a couple of playlists with all those episodes. So you can go and have a look at that if you're an old fan of the show and want to see our reactions and thoughts on all those old episodes. Otherwise, catch us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?